The news broke just before dawn. Russia had launched a nuclear-capable cruise missile. It wasn't a test in the traditional sense. It was a signal, the kind of message that ripples across every capital in the world, making presidents wake up and generals check their phones twice. The missile's name wasn't new. It had been whispered about for years, a ghost weapon born from the Cold War and rebuilt for the new age. But this time, it wasn't hidden behind secrecy. This time, the Kremlin wanted the world to see. Across Russian state media, anchors read the same phrase, strategic deterrence measures activated. Those words sent a chill through the halls of NATO command. Satellites picked up the launch plume somewhere in the Arctic region, a bright flash that carved through the frozen darkness. Within minutes, radar stations in Norway, Poland, and Alaska went on full alert. The missile was moving too fast for comfort, and its trajectory was unknown. Inside the Pentagon, the war room lit up. Analysts traced its path, referencing every satellite feed, calculating ranges and possible impact zones. The missile, according to initial readings, was a Kh-102, a long-range nuclear-capable cruise missile capable of carrying a 250-kiloton warhead and flying thousands of kilometers under radar. But what frightened analysts wasn't its power. It was its silence. The Kh-102 flies low, hugging terrain, almost invisible to most defense systems until it's too late. For an hour, the world held its breath. Was this a warning, a mistake, or the beginning of something far worse? The Russian Ministry of Defense soon released a statement claiming it was a routine strategic readiness drill. But no one believed that. You don't launch a nuclear cruise missile in the middle of heightened tensions without expecting a reaction. Ukraine had already accused Moscow of escalating the war beyond limits, and Western nations feared that this was Russia's way of reminding everyone it still held the keys to Armageddon. In Moscow, footage aired of a massive mobile launcher rolling across the tundra. Soldiers in white camouflage prepared the launch sequence. The missile emerged, sleek and black against the snow, a weapon built not just to destroy but to terrify. When it fired, the shockwave rippled through the landscape, scattering snow for miles. Cameras captured the flame trail disappearing into the clouds, leaving behind a deafening silence. In Kiev, air raid sirens wailed across the city. Military analysts there watched every movement with tense focus. They knew this wasn't a direct attack, but it was a psychological strike, a reminder that the nuclear shadow still hung over every battlefield. Ukrainian forces raised their readiness level, and Allied intelligence teams began tracking secondary launches. None came, but the tension refused to fade. By morning, European markets shook. Oil prices spiked. Defense contractors saw their stocks surge. News networks ran continuous coverage, debating whether this was posturing or preparation. Some experts argued it was Russia's response to Western support for Ukraine's drone attacks deep into Russian territory. Others said it was meant for a different audience, a warning to NATO not to cross certain red lines. Inside Russia, the narrative was different. State media called it a triumph of strength, a display of technological supremacy. They said the missile had successfully hit a designated test target in the Far East, demonstrating perfect accuracy. Crowds cheered the footage on giant public screens, but among ordinary Russians there was unease. Everyone knew what nuclear readiness meant: not peace, but proximity to disaster. As hours passed, world leaders began responding. The White House called for restraint. NATO issued an emergency statement, condemning reckless provocations. China urged calm but reminded that power must be balanced by responsibility. In the United Nations chamber, delegates exchanged cold words behind diplomatic smiles. The world was once again staring into the nuclear abyss, a place it had hoped to never revisit. Military experts explained the danger in simple terms. Unlike ballistic missiles, cruise missiles can maneuver. They can change direction mid-flight, fly under radar coverage, and strike with surgical precision. If armed with a nuclear warhead, such a missile could devastate an entire city before anyone could react. That is why even a single launch, even as a test, sends shockwaves through global defense systems. By noon, the missile's trajectory was confirmed to have ended over the Novaya Zemlya test range, far from populated zones. But the geopolitical impact was already done. Every intelligence agency now had to update its models. If Russia was willing to demonstrate this capability now, what would stop them from deploying it in a real conflict? In underground bunkers across Eastern Europe, NATO air defense crews practiced intercept drills. Radar screens flickered with simulations of incoming low-altitude targets. Commanders reminded their teams that in modern warfare, minutes could decide millions of lives. The anxiety was tangible and visible, yet everywhere. Inside the Kremlin, reports suggested that the launch was personally authorized. Advisors presented it as a response to increasing Western interference and the use of long-range weapons by Ukraine. The message was clear. Russia wanted to show it could match escalation with escalation. It was no longer just about conventional warfare. It was about psychological dominance. On Russian television that evening, the missile launch replayed in slow motion. The sound of the ignition echoed through speakers, accompanied by patriotic music. Commentators called it a warning to the world. Meanwhile, in cities across Europe, anti-war demonstrations erupted. Protesters held signs reading "No Nuclear Future" and "Stop the Madness." Fear had once again crossed borders faster than any missile. Behind the scenes, diplomatic hotlines buzzed. Back-channel conversations tried to lower the temperature. The U.S. and its allies demanded transparency. Russia refused to provide details, citing national security. The standoff deepened not through battle, but through silence and suspicion. As night fell, the skies above Moscow were calm, but tension was electric. Citizens scrolled through their phones, watching clips of the launch over and over. Some felt pride, others felt dread. No one could ignore what had happened. The launch wasn't just a military test, it was a statement that nuclear deterrence was alive, and its edge was sharper than ever. In think tanks from Washington to Berlin, analysts began asking the hard question: was this the start of a new nuclear era? After decades of disarmament treaties and confidence building, the old playbook seemed gone. Nations were rearming, trust was dissolving, and technology was accelerating faster than diplomacy could keep up. By the next morning, satellite photos of the launch site circulated online. You could see the burn marks in the snow, the empty launcher trucks, the cold blue light of dawn reflecting off metal debris. It was a haunting image, a reminder that the line between show of strength and spark of war had become dangerously thin. The world had survived another day without catastrophe, but the echo of that launch lingered. In every news broadcast, every military briefing, the phrase repeated like a drumbeat: nuclear cruise missile launched. 3 words that carried centuries of fear. 3 words that reminded humanity how fragile peace truly is. And as leaders gathered behind closed doors to talk, strategize, and reassure, one question remained unanswered. Next time, will it still be just a test?